Hello and welcome to Adventures in AI, where the Insight Flow team members share things that have caught our attention over the past week and talk about our own experiences in the world of AI. I'm Giles.
I'm Rich.
And I'm Graham. Giles, I understand that you're going all geeky on us and coming out of the technological caves and want to talk about economics and finance and the cost of running AI solutions.
Yeah, I know. Who knew I was interested in economics and other things? I wanted to talk about an example of the costs of AI and just use that as an illustration of how to price AI solutions and some of the considerations that go into that. So what prompted this was, according to the Wall Street Journal, who did a report on it, GitHub Copilot is currently charging $10 even a month to its users, and is costing an average of $30 per user, with some users actually costing $80 a month. So they're making $20 a month at least loss, or certainly on average. So for those of you who aren't developers, you probably don't know what GitHub Copilot is. So it's a tool that uses generative AI and your own coding history to suggest code and help you complete code faster. I use it and it certainly speeds up writing code considerably. And they actually did a controlled trial. So GitHub ran a controlled trial with about 2,000 developers and showed that it makes developers around about 55% more productive and about 7% more likely to complete a task. Now, other studies have shown much more marginal gains, but they do show significantly higher developer satisfaction as well. So there are other benefits, not just how quickly someone can write code. So, I mean, I think, when it comes to the economics of Copilot, even if it makes a developer 10% more productive, the benefits that organizations can get from that, could be thousands of dollars or even tens of thousands of dollars per year. So therefore, there's a strong argument that GitHub should just put the price up and, organizations will just accept that because of the gains that they're getting from it. I think this reflects a wider reality around the pricing of AI solutions. So ChatGPT is free but rate limited, or you can pay $20 a month for the Plus version. And that's almost certainly costing OpenAI money. So my question really is, why do these big tech firms not charge more? Do we think GitHub will raise their prices, or is something else at play? So I wanted to really just explore the arguments for and against. And I'm pretty sure these arguments are going on inside GitHub and Microsoft, who own GitHub. So the first point is around adoption. So AI is new and hasn't yet proved itself in many use cases. And I suspect that the early adopter developers paying $10 per month aren't actually large corporate development teams that have it funded by their employers. They're sort of single, either small dev shops or their individual developers. And so for GitHub, I think the real money is with enterprise, but those guys will have concerns about privacy, data security. They want to see proof that it can actually make the productivity gains that people are saying. So one argument is that actually they're pricing it at a level to buy adoption so that developers get used to using it, and then employers will have to start providing it as a tool for the developers to use.
So interestingly, Microsoft, of course, own GitHub. They're pricing their version of Copilot at I think it's $30. So perhaps they've already learnt their lesson with GitHub. I don't know if this is kind of thinking in rose-tinted glasses, but I do like the idea of there at least being a free or a very cheap to use version of AI, and I think the only way to do that is to think about those users. They're not the customers; they're the product. And we do know that, of course, AI is constantly getting trained by interactions with users. So there is still some benefit there that I see.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting, and it sort of leads on to the next point, which the concept of data is oil. So to tune, train, and improve the AI-driven services, you need users. And ChatGPT actually my understanding was it was originally intended as a way to drive adoption so that OpenAI could capture training data. And it kind of took on a life of its own, now has over 100 million users. And so perhaps the true economics here are about research and development, maybe plus market share, plus or minus market share. So I wonder if that's actually the case in this particular example.
I think it's always been the case that data has been seen as oil. In fact, it's really interesting. I think data can either be seen as oil, which smooths things, or as the glue, which holds things together. And I love the idea of something being at this one time oil and glue. I think it's just important. But I mean, I think they've got to be a wee bit careful here. And sort of slightly to your previous point and to this one, businesses have always had a real struggle about raising prices. And they've got to work incredibly hard on product and functionality if they are to successfully raise price. And I think there's a real truism that if something's priced as a cheap commodity, then it gets seen as a cheap commodity. And changing people's mindset around that becomes really hard.
And I just wanted to frame that point about how fast OpenAI has been adopted. And I think a good way of doing that is if you look at the likes of some of the, say, big social media platforms such as Facebook, they took 10 months to reach 1 million users. Twitter took 2 years, and ChatGPT took 5 days. So it's absolutely mind-blowing numbers in terms of how quickly people are taking this technology up.
Yeah, exactly. I think the platforms are already there, so it's very easy to drive adoption quickly. I mean, I think actually to Graham's point, the pricing piece here and how much you charge, if you think about what an AI could be replacing, then charging $10 a month makes absolutely no sense for the level of service that you're providing. So it's an anomaly, to my mind at least. Then the third point was around unpredictability of usage patterns. So at its simplest level, this might simply be a modeling error. So when you're thinking about how much it costs to run the model, how much it costs to deliver the service, you have to accurately predict how often someone's going to use it, how much data is going to go in and out of the model, number of requests to the model that are required. There's a bunch of other things as well, but the cost of hosting it essentially. And on top of that, you've got the costs of training and tuning models. So it might just be an issue with modeling usage patterns, in which case it's not going to be unique to Microsoft and GitHub, and potentially we can all learn something from it. So my question is, did they just get the modeling wrong?
I think the big surprise for everyone was actually just how good it was. And in that respect, I think it's almost impossible to model accurately. And now I know I'm being slightly facetious here, but I think you can make a compelling argument that not even OpenAI engineers know exactly how it works, because they've set up the environment and the instructions, and the machine learning process has done the rest. So I genuinely believe it's been somewhat of a surprise to them too. But I think, like any market, though, modeling and prediction will improve substantially. I think once we get over this hump of actually loads more people using it than we think, we'll be able to more accurately predict how we'd use it in the future.
I think the other part of it, though, and certainly something that's taken me a while to understand, is just how it's being used or how it works. This idea that you've got tokens, you're getting charged for tokens, but you're getting charged per interaction, and a relatively simple set of questions may end up with a lot of tasks, a lot of interactions. And I don't think users at the moment have this concept of what is an expensive question to ask AI as opposed to what's a cheap and easy question to ask AI. And I don't think, and as a consequence of that, I'm certain that most people don't actually have their own model in their head about this costs a lot of money. To sort of look at it in a different way. If we get into a 1 litre car and drive at below 50 miles an hour for the next hour, we know we're not using much petrol. Equally, if we get into a V12 and roar around a track, we know we are using lots of petrol, and are not surprised that our petrol bill is very high. And I don't think there's the same equivalence yet at all with AI, that people don't have this idea of whether it's a V12 version of the AI or a 1 litre little baby car.
Well, and I think there's an argument to say they shouldn't need to know that. So I think part of the challenge of pricing it is to get it priced at a level that people can understand easily and go, okay, I know how much it's going to cost me each month. But therefore, the challenge of modeling is trying to work out the variations in levels of usage from one user to the next. So you may have some users that are not profitable and some other ones that are. So I would see that as a key part of the challenge. Okay, so then the other one is the I suppose the Moore's law of new technology. So not actually Moore's law, but the cost of new technology drops over time, and I think this is something that is definitely in favour of them keeping the pricing as it is. So generally, with any technology, as you scale it, it gets cheaper. The cost of an A100 chip, I was just listening to something earlier about the 2019 power and cost of a basically the chips they use to train AI is about the same as it is now, but the one's now 8 times faster. So that's 4 years. It's gone 8 times faster. So if you think of that driving your cost, certainly in terms of training the models, then it's 8 times cheaper now to train a model than it was in 2019. And so I would say, the cost of hosting will go in a similar direction, but probably not as quickly. So let's say the cost of actually running a model goes 30 to 50% cheaper next year than it is this year, and the same again the year after. Roughly 18 to 24 months will be enough to be able to cover the costs and then start to make some profit. So then the question really is it in their interest to make the losses between now and then in the interests of getting all the data and being able to improve the product and learning a whole load of stuff in the process? Or actually, are they better off just raising the price to something like $20 and split the difference?
I think on that one, what they're doing makes sense. I think that, per my previous comment about getting the product more sophisticated and adding more functionality, that's something I think you can clearly see them do. And I think that in this particular case, there's a whole piece about training users. It's so new, it's so different, and requires such a different way of thinking that actually having millions upon millions upon millions of users experimenting and discovering and starting to work out how it's changing their life or how it's changing their work or whatever is incredibly important. And I feel that so long as they can add the functionality that allows them to make money, I mean, we want them to make money over time, then starting at this point probably makes a huge amount of sense.
I think as well, you'll start to find that customers can reduce their own costs in terms of optimizing which language models they call and when they do it. So Graham, to go back to your advantage of the 1 litre engine and the V12, it's actually knowing when should I use the 1 litre engine, just trip around the corner to go to Tesco, and when do I need the V12? And so there's tuning that people will be able to do themselves, which actually we see people doing already. In terms of, we've got ChatGPT 3.5 and we've got ChatGPT 4, so there is kind of already some tuning that you can do. There are plenty of tasks that 3.5 can do that you could do for cheaper, and there are some that you'd want to go with the Model 4.
Yep, agreed.
Graham, so in the last podcast, you were talking about the link between AI and humans, and do you want to expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, since we were talking about that in various conversations, it's occurred to me, I've had an idea that AIs are like interns, I think, is probably the level we'd put it. And I think there's some really useful parallels here. So if we start by asking the first question, if you had an intern coming into the office, would you expect them to work perfectly with no supervision from that point on, however clever or brilliant they were? And the answer is clearly no. And I think it's really useful to think in these terms about AI, because if you're expecting AI to perform brilliantly immediately, you will almost certainly be disappointed. There's this huge misconception that in one sense that because it's technology, it's a bit binary. It's either working brilliantly or it's not working at all. And this idea that AIs arrive in our office complete and perfect, and that their tasks are going to be perfectly performed, and we don't need to do anything more about it. And the reverse is almost certainly likely to be true. And this means that we need to not just think about implementing AI, but to think about how we give structured input and how we train them and how we bring them into our business to make them more and more useful members of our society. But I think, if we look at it, you can break it down. So if you start with, and topic we've already talked about, but the availability of data. If you had an intern, one of the things you'd be doing with them is making sure that they're looking in the right place, they're finding good quality, relevant data to the task. And that's an ongoing process. The world is continually changing, and therefore, the data about the world is continually changing. And throughout the planning, deployment, and future use of AI, there needs to be this idea of constant search for the most up-to-date raw data to make sure that the AIs are working from the best information possible. And that's an ongoing task. Just in the same way that a new worker needs to be pointed at the right information, we'll probably be needing to point AIs at the right information for quite a long time. Now, it's almost certain that at some point, one of the AI tasks will be to be making its own decision about what's the right information. But I suspect that's a part of the interaction that will continually need human intervention. And you're going to have to carry on putting effort into your AI agents.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really hard parts about this is knowing what's new, what's relevant, so what might be new to one person, for example, may be old to another. And so I think finding ways of allowing you to point the AI in the right direction, point it to the right information, I think it is going to be really critical. And actually, there's quite a lot of work that's already gone on around retrieval systems and all of that sort of thing in terms of how you actually how do you point the AI at the right information in the first place. But I think there's, from a technical perspective, it's not without its challenges because there's so much data and information out there. The model can only consume a relatively small amount when you're actually asking it a question. And therefore, it's about how do you condense that down to just enough to give a good answer without being too much to either use up lots of tokens or run out of space in your prompt to ask the model what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point of view, and of course, one of the human inputs is helping the AI determine what is useful and what's not, and it's also, of course, one of the points where human bias may well be incited. So don't look at this, look at this. Unconscious bias or conscious bias, and there may be some really interesting pieces around that, and actually sort of leading on to that, then talking about conscious bias and unconscious bias and putting bias into AI. Obviously, one of the things that will make a huge difference is how we ask questions. In AI's case, it's how we frame the prompt. But if we were talking to our interns, the questions we ask and how we phrase them determine a lot of the answer. And prompt engineering is a huge topic around AI at the moment. I don't believe that will ever actually fade away completely. I suspect that we will get better at writing prompts and understand what the implications are, perhaps in the way that we got better at doing search, and that intrinsically people came to understand, as an example, some of the aspects of Boolean search and those types of things. But it does feel to me that making sure we frame the right question will remain a core skill and something we need to look at.
It's interesting you talk about prompt engineering, and we touched on it very quickly last week, but I would now say that's a bona fide job title and role. And we've seen via kind of this paid prompt engineering sites that you can pay for good prompts from. So there's definitely a market for for effective prompts, and you will, if you Google it now, you'll find plenty of job listings now for prompt engineers. But I think my, I guess, prediction for the future is I'd go one step further than that. I think AI related skills are going to start making the way onto CVs, even positions that you might think are not necessarily directly related to AI. Certainly in kind of, I guess, consulting and legal roles, they seem like the next most likely possibilities where people will be showing off their skills.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that whole skill set is really interesting. But I do think that there's the counter challenge, the challenge to managers and team leaders. And we know that briefing any team member, but particularly new and junior team members, is essential, and that obviously will remain essential. And I think it's fair to say that all team members benefit from good briefing. And that team's best work often comes when that is done. And this will also be true about AI. So this idea that says that we're asking it the right questions, we're giving it the right context, the direct data, I think will become a really fundamental part of the description of people's jobs. And I think the final area where AI is like intern, I think is an interesting one, because we tend to think of technology as staying at roughly the same level. It is as sophisticated as it is on the day we buy it, a year or so after, perhaps with a few upgrades. But by their very nature, it's almost certain that the AIs we're using, that we have in our organizations, will themselves get more sophisticated. And the question occurs to me is, does this mean that their roles will change, that AIs will get promoted? An individual agent will get better over time as it works, as it learns, what works for the business that's using it. As a worker gets more experience, their position will be reevaluated. They'll get promoted. They'll get paid more. And I just wonder if that's going to happen with AI.
Well, so maybe back to GitHub Copilot, it will be worth $30 per month eventually. Yeah. I definitely think we'll see AI mature in the same way, and I actually think it's two things that will mature. So one is the organization's maturity on how it uses the AI, and the second is how effective the AI is at doing the job. And back to the sort of point or the topic we discussed last week about jobs versus tasks. If we see AI maturing from just doing individual tasks to being able to handle jobs, to eventually being able to handle all of a role, and then who knows, all of running a company, and I know people have done some experiments on this already, then I think there is definitely a path you could see to the AIs really taking over a lot of the roles. That doesn't mean to say all of the humans get moved out. I think they take a different set of responsibilities and roles that are probably more interesting and more human in what they're all about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to sort of wrap this up, I think we've all had junior team members who've haired off enthusiastically in completely the wrong direction. And it be sure that the same will happen with AI, however well we implement it. But I think it's fair to say that youthful enthusiasm is a real benefit to the business, and when it's well managed and gathered back into line, can be incredibly productive. I think Gen AI is definitely going to look like the new intern in the office, much more that than a piece of productivity software. And it's going to need ongoing guidance, training, and input from management teams. I think it's really worth noting this if you are planning a deployment. So we've just been talking about AIs looking like humans. Another part of that is AIs writing like human. And Rich, you've been looking at this.
Exactly. So I think you've quite successfully argued that a useful way to think about AI is as an intern. And so my next question from that is actually, how can we get AI to write like a human, as if it is yourself doing the writing? So I just wanted to open with this section with a question to both of you, and that's, Do you think that you can generally spot content that's been written by an AI?
So I personally think it's really hard. I don't think you can. Well, in fact, we know that there's algorithms that have tried and they are unable to tell the difference.
I think in marketing, there's an awful lot that I read now, and I think that is AI written. But to be fair, marketing has always been a home of quite poor writing sometimes, and it may be that just what I'm reading is human written and still not very good,
or possibly AI written and checked by a bad human.
And so, using that marketing example, Graham, if you're recognizing that it's been written by an AI, would you be less likely to, I guess, read the whole thing or engage with it in general? Would that be a fair assumption?
So I think it wouldn't change my opinion on it. It would be depending on the content. And so yes, if it was bad and therefore I thought it was written by AI, then I would be less likely to engage with it.
So I think Giles has got it exactly right. I think the thing here is not whether it's AI written or not, but whether it's good or bad. And I think that I'm turned off by bad writing, irrespective of its source.
I wanted to, well, first to see if there are any maybe surveys or tests done to see how often people are being fooled, to see how accurately people can spot if something's written by AI or not. And a recent survey that I found, they got a bunch of linguistics experts. So these are people that study human language for a living. And what I found really interesting was they struggled to differentiate AI generated content from human writing. And when they reviewed extracts, the experts could only identify that it was created by AI about kind of 39% of the time. So 61% of the time, at least, you're probably being fooled. You just don't realize it. And what I really wanted to pick up on is when we do spot AI written content, like sometimes this is due to patterns, like conscious or subconscious, but often it's simply because we associate human content with quality. So that really goes to what Giles and Graham you were saying earlier. If it's written by an AI but it's good quality, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think it's actually really telling that, if the go-to praise for well-written AI is I can't believe a human didn't write that. And I wonder if actually it might be the other way around.
If you get AI right, nobody looks at it and says, hey, this is great AI content. If you get it wrong, then everybody's going to say, this is obviously AI content and it's obviously rubbish.
There's actually been, so as a very good recent example of that, there's a game studio that they were responsible for creating the latest Gollum Lord of the Ring game, and it was universally panned. And they recently issued an apology, which now is doing the rounds, and everyone's saying it looks like it was written by ChatGPT, which has only intensified the backlash. It's almost they didn't care about what the apology said. It was just, oh, this wasn't very heartfelt because an AI did it.
We don't know how to write an apology, so we'll get a robot to do it for us.
So I really wanted to start to think about how can we make sure, or at least try to make sure, that we get an output from an AI that fools us into thinking humans wrote it. And to do that, firstly, okay, let's think about what we mean when we say we want AI to write like a human. And actually, I think that we're typically asking two things. And the first thing is you're asking it to write with the behavior, characteristics, and nuance of a human. And secondly, actually, you're just asking for it to be high quality because there's this ingrained assumption in our head that usually humans equals better quality. So I guess, how can we get it to do that?
Ask it to.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it sounds obvious, but how many of you have actually asked it to ask like a human? And you might be doing this and not realizing it anyway. And there's a few stages that you can go through to help get human-like output. The first of which is describe the kind of human text that you want. So, for example, you could provide a very basic description of how human writing differs For example, make sure it has a good amount of complexity and variations as if it were written by a human. Or you can go that next stage further, which some of you might be doing already and not realizing it, is when you're telling it to act as, say, a physicist or a gardening expert or whoever should be an expert on the topic you want to output it, you're essentially asking it to act as a human that should know the answer. But you can actually go further than this. So I think that first level is generally the level a lot of people are using it, or certainly kind of mid-tier users. But if you've got examples of text that you want ChatGPT to be able to, I guess, imitate, so that might be your own or other people's, a really useful process that you can go through is to upload that into ChatGPT and get it to write a set of standard operating procedures based on your tone, style, methods, opinions, or philosophies, or whatever you deem to be important in the text that you want output. And then actually you start to build up a profile of, if it was you, what you sound like, or a profile of the kind of person that you want ChatGPT to be. And that output, and that set of procedures. Another useful tip, if you didn't already know, you can seed all of your chats with these standard operating procedures, and they're actually called custom instructions. So all you need to do to access them is you click on your name in the bottom left of ChatGPT, click on custom instructions, and that will allow you to add preferences or requirements across all of ChatGPT's conversations.
So just a quick thought on that. That presumably means that a single GPT can actually be speaking with a whole number of different people's voices, which again I think is a really interesting one. I'm certainly going to go away and put some of my various essays through that process just to see how many ways ChatGPT can find to say pompous and opinionated. But that's just me. I mean, I presume that you can also have quite a lot of fun with this as well, as particularly setting other people up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can set up a few pranks on people if you ever have access to their ChatGPT and can change their custom instructions. Of course, hypothetically speaking, you could change them. And
Don't
my
try this
favorite
at
one that
home,
I've
kids.
seen is, well, yeah, but the favorite one that I saw recently was someone had set the instructions so that it always answered the question that was asked, but then related it to a fact about ants. So the poor guy, I think he was trying to do his maths homework, and every answer he got a little factoid about ants and why it mattered to his question. So those are some tips there to get your output sounding more human. But I think one really important point that I said earlier is actually human-like AI content is actually a synonym for quality content. It's because our assumptions are that humans produce quality, and there are many tips for improving quality, which we will explore in this series. But I don't want to leave kind of that point unaddressed and anyone empty-handed. So I wanted to give a very basic conceptual framework that you can use to improve the quality of your outputs, and this can be applied to many different tasks. And actually, Graham, this very much relates to what you said about AI being the new interns and not expecting them to be perfect from day one. And the whole point is they work much better with some hand-holding. The framework that I use often it's instead of approaching a task as something like, okay, AI, do this. Instead of that, ask the AI to plan an approach and work through it step by step together with you. So, for example, instead of asking it something like, write me a blog on gardening, you would say, design a plan that we can go through together step by step for the following task, write a blog on gardening. And I found markedly improved results by going through this. And a kind of another little finishing off tip to that is when you're ready for the AI to write, in this example, the blog, I always find it's best to ask it to summarize all of the steps and outputs that you've gone through first, and then say, okay, brilliant, now write the blog. And a very useful side effect of going through this method is that actually your output is going to naturally be more human-like because you've planned the blog together with the AI, and the whole time you've actually been infusing it with your own human character and insights.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and again, I think this shows or illustrates the point that Graham was making about it treating your AI like an intern. But I think it's very much this whole idea of working side by side with AI. Don't assume that your friendly AI is just something you can chuck problems at and expect it to solve them. You have to work with it and collaborate effectively to get good results. So I think we've heard a little bit about how AI pricing is likely to change and some of the things driving that. How treating AIs like humans will give you better results. So I think my key takeaway from this is that I need to take ChatGPT out to a nice dinner, treat it really well, and then hopefully I'll get fantastic results from it. So that's it for this time. I've been Giles.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Rich.